When you say that you're a failure and you're a recovering lawyer and you've had this experience, most leaders are willing to listen. And second, we develop that trust and respect relationship. And the concept of the fool is I will speak truth to power all the time. Again, the No B.S. is absolutely not only a part of my coaching, but me. 80% of the leaders who come to me don't enter the program. They suddenly realize they don't want to hear the truth, that this is not going to be a hug. The other 20% come in and stay. So I built my practice off of that 20%, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay with anyone who says, I tell everyone I'm an acquired taste, and I'm okay if you don't like the taste.
It's no secret that the COVID pandemic drastically altered the workplace, and for many people, their relationship with work changed too. This is a topic we've covered before, and we'll cover it again, I'm sure, because even today, the after effects of the COVID-19 years continue to have an impact on our organizations, suppliers, customers, and team members, and all of the relationships around that in almost all industries. The changes that it ushered in are here to stay in one form or another, whether that's hybrid working, changing contractual relationships, or just the balance of power between the employee and employer. So the forward-looking leader will be always on the lookout for ways to understand, engage with, and see the opportunities within this new context. Which is where my guest today can help. His name is Paul Glover, and he calls himself the No B.S. post-pandemic leadership expert, with over 40 years of experience, including navigating some pretty difficult turning points in his own career and life, which I'll let him tell you about in a moment. Today, Paul is a leadership speaker and coach and author, helping leaders to be the best version of themselves. This is Leading with Integrity, the podcast for new managers and first-time leaders, especially those in specialist-driven and high-technology environments or organizations. But all leaders and all listeners are always welcome. This podcast is free for everyone, and it always will be. That is my promise to you. I don't take sponsors or other people's adverts. But if you do want to support what Leading with Integrity is doing, then you can join our community and get something back for it as well. More on that at the end of the show. Okay, let's get on with the episode and welcome Paul to the show and talk about his No BS approach to leading after COVID.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
I'm joined today by Paul. It's lovely to have you on the show, Paul. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here as a guest. Obviously, we should have an interesting conversation.
I've no doubt we will. And let's kick that off by really handing the reins over to you to tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your background, your business, what you do today, and why you do it.
I'm an executive coach. I coach specifically in manufacturing and distribution. It's a good match for me. I bill myself as the No BS post-pandemic leadership coach. It's very specific about what I do. And it is all about leadership and improving the leaders so that they become better at what they're supposed to do. I've been doing that since 2001. Prior to that, I'm a recovering lawyer. I practiced labor and employment law for 30 years in the city of Chicago in the federal court system. 1995, and by the way, practicing law was the love of my life, second only to my wife. I enjoyed it. It gave me the opportunity to do a couple of things. The interesting concept of trial lawyering is you get to take the jury on a journey. And if you're good at it, you are representing your client, but you put your client in a position, I call it taking the jury on the hero's journey. Because I've got to tell them a story. And so as a lawyer, you do a combination of critical thinking, because you do have to present the facts, but you also have to be a storyteller. And I was very good at that, and really enjoyed it. And of course, just as with everyone, I mess up my own life more than anyone else ever could. I have a saying that I use is, I've had more trouble with myself than any other person I've ever met. In 1995, I was found guilty of 30 counts of taking bribes and kickbacks, and sentenced to 7 years in prison. I spent 5.5 years in prison and got out without a profession. Lost my law license and would never get it back. And rightfully so, by the way. If you're going to be a crook, you shouldn't be practicing law and having people put their lives and money into your hands. I didn't like it, but I accepted it. Prison was transformative to me because I determined that, by the way, I deserve to go to prison. I always like to make sure everyone understands that. In fact, the federal judge that sentenced me, I had practiced before. And as I stood there getting ready for a sentence, he said, "You're one of the few defendants that if I could, I would give you more time." And so that was my reputation and was also my crimes. And I was the typical narcissist who believed I was the smartest guy in the room, and engaged in those activities that were illegal because of the blind spots and triggers that were inherent in my upbringing, as well as my experience. So prison saved my life. If I had not gone to prison, I definitely was on a path of self-destruction, and the people that I associated with were not good people. I tell everyone I was a bad guy wannabe, and I hung around with bad guys who were bad guys. They didn't want to be, they were. And so when I went to prison, I went there and I spent the first 2 years in revenge fantasy. I was going to get out and make everybody who put me in prison pay for having done this to me. But the prison experience over time showed me reality. And I came to the conclusion that I was responsible for everything that had put me in prison. By the way, I destroyed my family. I mean, I left them destitute. I'd spent every dollar that we had, my son's college education, second mortgage on our house, all trying to avoid going to prison, and did not obviously do that. Justice did prevail. I came to the concept of what was I going to do, because the realization of change has got to be followed with some type of action plan that actually lets you do that. And I decided, I'm an avid reader, and in prison, by the way, you have two things. You have plenty of time to reflect and plenty of time to read. And I came across the concept of the medieval fool. And everyone who looks at the Middle Ages sees the king on the throne, and at the foot of the throne, there's the fool, dressed in a motley outfit. He jumps up, he capers about, he sings a song, and everyone thinks, wow, there he was the entertainer. Well, that was not the purpose of the fool was not as an entertainer. Because the king had been appointed by divine right, anyone who challenged the king in any way committed heresy. And heresy was punished by death. The problem was the king obviously was not infallible. He was still a human being. And the concept of the fool was a counterbalance to that. The fool, because they were perceived to be crazy, were not covered by the same rules. They could say whatever they wanted to say. So the fool actually became the trusted advisor to the king. And I decided that what I needed, based on that concept, was fools in my life to tell me the truth, because I was not open to the truth about me. And so I started that concept. I started with my wife, the person that I'd hurt the most. And She originally said no. She said, I will not be your fool. She came down to visit me once a month, 5.5-hour drive down, Saturday and Sunday, and then back in a visiting room with 300 other inmates. And so she stuck by me. Obviously, I did not think that was going to happen. You go to prison for 5.5 years. The reality is most of the time, there isn't a family waiting for you when you get out. My family was. And finally, she said, if you're serious about this and you're willing to hear the truth about yourself, then yes. So we would have Saturday and Sunday visiting. And on Sunday, an hour before she was ready to leave, we would have a serious discussion about me. And it was painful. No one likes to be told about what an asshole they are and have been to everybody they loved, and how much of a narcissist I was. But I took it to heart because I realized that if I did not, and here's someone that I trusted and respected and loved who was telling me the truth. And I did. And I started to work on myself. And when I got out, realizing I could not practice law, I looked at my skill sets as well as this concept of the fool and decided, based on my experience and my skill sets as both a critical thinker and a storyteller, that I was going to become a coach, because most leaders need a fool, and they don't have them. Just the nature of leadership puts you in an echo chamber where you continue to hear what you want to hear, because that's what people repeat in the echo chamber. They find out what you want, and then they tell you that's what you want. Therefore, you continue to believe that you are the smartest person in the room, that you don't make mistakes, you're infallible. And what ends up doing is most of the time that fear of failure combined with that causes you eventually to self-destruct. I took that concept and I've developed it into a coaching practice. That's the basis for my coaching practice. I believe that every coach needs to first have the experience to actually coach others. But by the way, I tell everyone, before the pandemic, there were 2 million coaches. After the pandemic, there are 6 million coaches, because everyone believes that they can coach. And some absolutely can. But the reality is, if you don't have the life experience that you can turn into that process, I don't believe you're effective. And I have plenty of life experience, including the failure, because that's what most coaches aren't willing to bring to the experience. You know, the concept of being a coach is you're supposed to let them work it out. Most of the time they can't. That's why they're in the coaching process. So at some point, I tell them about me, and they understand that at the beginning, and it eases the relationship into productivity. When you say that you're a failure and you're a recovering lawyer and you've had this experience, most leaders are willing to listen. And second, we develop that trust and respect relationship. And the concept of the fool is I will speak truth to power all the time. Again, the No B.S. is absolutely not only a part of my coaching, but me. 80% of the leaders who come to me don't enter the program. They suddenly realize they don't want to hear the truth, that this is not going to be a hug. The other 20% come in and stay. So I built my practice off of that 20%, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay with anyone who says, I tell everyone I'm an acquired taste, and I'm okay if you don't like the taste. I'll tell you, I've always said too much information, but I'll wrap with this, right? I had a client, and I said, I need a testimonial. He said, absolutely. I said, well, I know you, so you need to tell me what it is. And he said, Paul is an acquired taste, like cyanide. So I said, I don't think I'm going to use that one. And he said, no, let me give you the real one. He said, Paul is a Sherpa. He will get you to the mountaintop, but he will not carry your pack. That's a coach to me. So with that said, too much time on where I'm at, but that's the concept that I coach on. That's been my journey to today. And it's who I am and what I do.
I have to say, I really like that description of a coach. That is, yeah, spot on. And yeah, I think I probably agree with you as well about how to be most effective as a coach too, because I think on the one hand, yes, I mean, logically, it is just the process. It's about asking the right questions and leading someone to their own outcome. So in theory, anyone can do that, right? Like nobody, you don't have to know all the stuff about their profession or their industry or any of that stuff. But in practice, I think we all know, we've all worked with a coach who maybe was lacking that experience, whether it's in life or in your sector or starting up the kind of company that you're running and so on and so forth. If they haven't done it themselves or have not at least been in a company where it was happening, then I think, yeah, you're right. They're lacking in the experience to do that most effectively.
That's the human condition. We want to make a connection with someone we can relate to. So we can't have that, in the speaking profession, the sage on the stage, right? The problem is that we seldom are able to connect with that experience. And so, it requires coaching done appropriately, from my perspective, releases a lot of raw emotion. Because at some point, the person you're coaching has got to reveal themselves. And we all walk around in what I call the work costume. We put on our work costume. This is how we're going to be perceived. We get to choose that costume, by the way. People do for everything. Every time we go out in public, we put on a costume. And the concept of, well, let's see what you look like without the costume on. And most people are deathly afraid of revealing that, and leaders in particular. Because they have worked themselves into this echo chamber where first they believe it and they say, well, this is not a costume. I'm like, well, of course it's a costume. If that can't be who you are, what do you mean? Well, when you go home, do you act like this? I mean, I'm curious. Who are you married to? Another CEO? You guys just banter about strategy all night? So anyway, yeah, it requires that you, first, you have to reveal yourself. And second, you obviously have got to be able to open someone else up to the concept. And by the way, I like I said, 20% of the people work with me, leaders, they don't, because one of the things I tell them pretty quickly, based off of some analytics, I believe very strongly in the 360-degree review. So one of the very first things we do is their team, whoever that is comprised of, they do a 360 review anonymously, so only I get the results. I'll take the composite, and that is the beginning of the conversation about, let's talk about how you're really perceived. One of the easiest ones is communication. Every leader believes that they're a great communicator. Their team believes they communicate by telepathy. If they think it, you're supposed to know it. And obviously, they're shocked when they get the results back of the 360 and it says your team thinks you blow when it comes to communicating. They have no idea what your message is, and they don't know what to do. If everyone is struggling to decide what you want them to do because you don't tell them, you're in clear expectations. That shocked leaders. They really expect to get back some glowing report as something that I'm going to say, oh my God, look how good you are. I'm not sure I can make you any better. You don't need me. And so we have this discussion, and one of the phrases that I use is, you need to accept the reality that you're not as good as you think you are. Some leaders end our relationship right then. They're like, nope. That's not true. I actually had one fellow who said, look, got the results back. He said, well, a week later, he called me. He said, let's do it again. Let's do the 360 again. And because I put my compensation on the line with the results, we do a 360 at the beginning of the year and a 360 at the end. Based off the level of improvement is how I get paid. If there's no improvement, I don't collect a fee. So that's how I skin in the game. I also believe coaches have to have skin in the game. It really hones your involvement, right? It'll also make you kick them in the butt when they're not doing what they've agreed to do. So anyway, this guy said, let's do it again. I said, no, that's not how this works. At the end, he said, no, we need to do it. And I said, okay, tell me why. Tell me why this is so urgent. Well, he said, I got the results and I just don't agree with them. So I got my team together and I said, we're going to do this until we get it right. I said, you're too dumb to be coached. I also have a thing. I can't coach stupid, right? I mean, I can coach anything. I can't coach stupid. And if you want to be stupid, and then you need to find somebody, because you'll find somebody else. Keep looking. And that ended our relationship. But that's exactly how brutal you have to be with people to shock them into doing a transformative journey, because that's what coaching should be about. I was shocked by going to prison. I mean, I tell everyone I hope it doesn't take that much for you to realize you need to change. But let me give you some reality, and you need to tell me, are you willing to deal with that reality instead of hide from it? It's a very simple process, very painful for most leaders.
Yeah, so there's a lot to pull out from that. I think some of the things that struck me as you were speaking there, there's this, it's tied up in the authenticity piece, I think, because there's that, who you really are at home with the family versus who you're projecting at work. And I think, again, that's everyone in a job does that to some extent, I think. And there's the old school ways of looking at things, and the word professionalism springs to mind, which always used to wind me up slightly. But I think it is especially difficult for leaders because there's that added pressure, there's that added expectation, there's that feeling that everyone in the room is looking to you, at you, waiting to see what you're going to do. And so it's almost like a natural defense mechanism, isn't it, to just throw up some sort of persona that you think they are expecting to see. And then before you know it, 10 years have passed, and you've turned yourself into this monstrosity that bears no resemblance to who you really are. And I think that's why authenticity is getting so much attention in recent years. Well,
first, the rest of my title, my moniker is post-pandemic. I believe the pandemic has provided the necessity that transformative event has occurred. And you mentioned it, professionalism. Prior to the pandemic, even though people, by the way, all leaders find the right words, right? You say, I'm going to say the right things, right? Well, that's okay. In 2019, the business community decided that they were going to talk about well-being before the pandemic, right? Because we realized this. The problem was that they realized it, but they weren't going to do anything about it. The pandemic suddenly said, first, workers said, if I'm risking my life to go to work for you, you better realize I have needs and start to provide for those needs. Because this is now reality. Don't talk to me about what it was. I'm risking my life every day I go to work. Isn't that how we looked at it? I mean, oh my God, and by the way, the concept of essential workers was I can't stay at home. Right? If I have a job and I want to get paid, I actually have to risk my life going to work. That's at least 60% of the population. So the reality was the workforce has called leaders out. They said, oh, you said you cared about us. You said you wanted us to be taken care of, well-being. Now let's see you put up or shut up. Well, guess what? We're not as into that as we think we were, right? We love saying the words. Oh my God, we actually have to do things that no. So you mentioned professionalism, and the pandemic has taken that word and said that's not enough. If all you want to be is professional with me, I will not engage with you. Now I may do the work for the money. But if we all talk, leaders want engagement, right? Because that's connected to productivity and profit. You're not going to get it being professional. The pandemic has said to the leader, there now has to be a mix of professionalism and personalism. You have to understand that we want you to be interested in us as human beings, not as assets. And that requires that you be a human being and that you understand what we need and you interact with us as a human being. So suddenly the requirements of leadership have shifted dramatically. We've always empathy. Everyone loves empathy, except no one really wants to be empathetic. Empathetic has got to be connected to compassion. Empathy is, I realize your pain. Compassion is, I'm going to do something about it. So empathy is fantastic. But if you don't take empathy and go, now we'll work together to help you with these issues, then it's no good. It's just a word. It's an empty word. So compassion is where we now are bringing leaders into the process. And that process has changed from transaction to relationship. Before transaction, I pay you for so many hours of work, you produce the work, we're done. Go home. Right? Now, that's not why people are staying. That's why the Great Resignation, right? And it's continuing, not to the same degree for a variety of reasons, but it's continuing. 40% of all employees are still thinking about going to another company. Well, why? Because it's not wages. Everybody thinks it's all about wages and benefits. The market has determined you're going to pay competitively. Otherwise, you don't keep anybody anymore. People will quit in a heartbeat. Why? I realize that I have a life and I need to live that life. And if this job is killing me, I'm not staying. So we have that. Gallup does the engagement poll every year. And what we have is the 60% of employees, we call them quiet quitters. Now they've been around forever, but we've now labeled them differently. They're doing just enough not to get fired. But they're actively looking for another job because no one wants to do just enough not to get fired. I truly believe people, employees, I even hate the word employees, by the way. I'm a term guy. Team members. You want me on the team. By the way, you're not a manager. Nobody wants to be managed. Isn't that a terrible word? I'm going to manage you. What, are you kidding me? I want a leader. I want a team leader. That means you have to have a different skill set than being a manager, right? Team leader is all about recognizing needs, being empathetic, being compassionate, as well as getting the job done. There's no one who says we're not going to do the job. So anyway, the concept is that if you can't figure out how to make this transition to the new leadership style, which is absolutely better than old, the old style was crippling. Right? For the leaders. How would you like to have to wear that? In fact, I tell people it wasn't a work concept. It was a suit of armor, totally inflexible, right? You couldn't be authentic. Oh, God forbid you actually say that you've got failings. You have to be infallible. Geez, it sounds like a king. So the concept was take the crown off, get out of that kingly robe. How about if we actually start to interact with people as human beings? Doesn't mean you can't be the leader. Everyone likes a leader. Anyway, so we've gotten through that process right now, but it is, the knee-jerk reaction is, let's go back to the way it was. Everybody come to the office. Okay, I've showed you I can do my work at home, and you like my work, and I'm productive. Oh, but I should do the commute because you want to watch me work. 72% of companies put spyware on the camera at work. Oh, this is definitely encouraging me to be engaged with you because you clearly trust me. So we need to get over ourselves, and we need to understand that most people want to do the job and they want to do it well. They want to be compensated accordingly, but they want to be treated like human beings, and they want you to address their needs, their well-being. That is the transformation that I work with leaders on.
Loads of stuff in there that I absolutely agree with. Especially things like the terminology. And I agree with you. Employee, it feels like an unpleasant way of describing someone, doesn't it?
It does.
At the same time, like you say that word, everyone immediately knows what you mean. So we all kind of fall back on it, don't we? But I agree. I like team member better as well. There's so much there about that changing relationship to work and the way people view it now, particularly because of the pandemic. And I do wonder, like, if COVID hadn't happened, where would we be now in terms of work culture? It doesn't bear thinking about, does it, sometimes? But
I like I said, I don't, the process is in place, but it was glacial. So little progress because, and again, I look at Gallup's been doing engagement surveys for, I don't know, 25 years. The numbers haven't changed. They're the same. Like I said, we give it a different title because Gallup says they're unengaged, right? So we call them quiet quitters. Everybody wants to reframe, right? Because it makes it sound new. It's not new. And so that if you realize that this is still the norm, by the way, every leader says, well, that's not my company. Let's do a survey. The survey says, you suck. I am looking for another job. So when the leader says the two things I struggle with is engagement of the workers, the employees, and retention. Those are the two words that everybody says right now. That's what I need. Why is my talent leaving? Because you suck. Why else would they leave? Either you're not paying them enough or you're treating them like crap. Do you understand that there's a reason why your talent is leaving to go to that company down the street, right? And it shocks them. The reality of that shocks them. But that shock and that desperation, you can't be competitive anymore in the marketplace without that engaged workforce. So you say, do you want, my argument is really simple. It's a very simple equation. I am into simplicity. Engagement with your employees, your team members on a human and professional level will generate what you want. The outcome is they stay, they work harder. And everybody responds to words, right? Discretionary effort. The reality of that relationship that is human is you get discretionary effort, and that's effort you don't pay for. You can't pay for discretionary effort. And if you want that, because that suddenly generates, we talk about innovation and creativity. You want that, first, you can't pay for that. It has to be something people are willing to give you because they respect and want to. They want you to succeed. That means you have to want them to succeed. Reciprocity is every relationship, right? So these simple terms that describe what you want, what you need as a leader, they're achievable, right? This is not some magic weird thing that you have to have, fairy dust. There are things that you do that convince the people who work at your company that you care about them. Therefore, they will care about you. I don't know. Isn't that every relationship you're in? That lasts, by the way, there are people who love abusive relationships. There's 20% of the workforce I call them the working dead. They should have been fired yesterday, and they are toxic. They will infect everybody around them with toxicity. They stay because they love torturing the company. They do. They love stirring the pot. They love dysfunction because they get something out of that. And by the way, I guarantee you they're in every organization I've ever worked with. And first, the leaders say that's absolutely not true. And if we do a group meeting of managers, team leaders, they will immediately tell me who those people are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, again, I think we overcomplicate all of this because first, if I'm an expert, I need to make something so difficult you can't do it on your own. Right? You've got to have me stay. That's called consulting, right? So anyway, it is in my coaching, I break that down exactly like we're talking over a period of time. And then we put together an action plan where what you're supposed to do, you actually do. And every time we talk about the action plan. And if you did it, I give you a hug. If you didn't do it, I give you a boot. That's the way it works. There is no in between. Well, Yoda said there is no try. There's do or not do. Yoda and I get along just fine. So, yeah, I'll finish this up, right? I know I'm
Sure.
long-winded but you pushed the trigger. So there are those who say, I'm not going to do this. Why should I? Why should I smile? Well, all right, if you don't smile, let me tell you, the people look at you and go, wow, why would I tell that guy the truth? Because it looks like he's mad the way it is. If he hears the truth, he might kill me on the spot. No psychological safety there. So as I talk to leaders and I get their executive team together, I go, look, 166 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth. 15 years later, there wasn't a dinosaur left standing. You have a choice. The pandemic was the asteroid. Are you a dinosaur? Because if you are, your extinction time is there. I don't know when it is, but I guarantee it's there. Why? It's not working. And at some point, your boss is going to say, if your team keeps losing members, if they are not engaged, I need to replace you with someone who is empathetic and is compassionate and capable of leading, not managing. That message first it shocked people because command and control has truly been the way by the way, easiest form of leadership, command and control. I mean, I tell you what to do and you either do it and I control you with what? Money. I'm going to give you money and benefits and then you do it.
Is that actually leadership, though?
Oh, no, that's of course that's not leadership. But if you think your employees are coin operated and that's all it takes, then that's what you do.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah, because it doesn't work. Yeah, it's a funny one. I think the leader versus manager thing, I do agree with you there as well. I think there is a place for management. There's the organizational stuff, the administrative part of that role. I think you always have to have that. But I've always argued as well that you can't be any good as a manager with just that skill set. You have to also be capable in leadership. Now, I'm biased. Obviously, I'm going to say that. But
by the way, a cliche it works because it's true. It may be a cliche. It's still true. Let me tell you that one of the factors nobody's counted on, the X factor, is artificial intelligence. That is going to kill off managing because so much of the manager's job, the team leader's job, has been consumed by that stuff you just mentioned, the organizational requirements. Artificial intelligence is going to be formed around eliminating the need for the team leader to do this stuff. And it's going to turn you into a human leader because this other stuff that is aggravating your team leaders hate this stuff. Why? Oh my God, it's killing me. How many reports do I have to, how many needless meetings do I have to go to? So I think that artificial intelligence, as it develops as a tool that can be used, will replace a lot of that. I call it useless activity, necessary, but useless. Why? It does not impact the team. All it does is take care of the organizational necessities. And I recognize they're there, but why would you waste a team leader's time on that when they could be doing the things with their team that get what you say you want? Productivity, retention, engagement, and profit. Those things just need to be out of the equation.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's already apps out there that will manage your calendar for you. They will work out when in the day you're productive. They'll put certain types of activities in those times, and they'll do all of that for you based on AI. So it's not much of a stretch, is it, to go that one step further and do it for a whole team, is it? Absolutely. Maybe it already does. I don't know.
Well, I think the capabilities is being developed right now, and clearly few years. But that is going to change the nature of leadership dramatically, because it will separate those who can lead from those who cannot. You know, if I get a guy who's really good at the numbers, I think that he's a good leader. No, he's not a good leader. That's not the criteria. And so AI is going to take that out of the equation. I truly believe that. And I also think that that's now going to require that team leaders be educated about leading, because they're not. All right, we don't train the middle manager. Middle manager gets squeezed from the top and squeezed from the bottom, and they tell everybody in every survey, they say, "I'm not qualified to do all of this. Help me." We go, "Well, work it out." Right?
Yeah,
you can figure it out. Smart guy. By the way, I love this. I wouldn't have promoted you if you couldn't do the job. You know what that says? Don't ask for help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's probably my biggest pet peeve actually about leadership is, and probably because I've lived it, I've been there. I was that manager. You know, you're pushed in the swimming pool at the deep end and sink or swim. If you sink, it's your own fault. But if you swim, then the leader takes credit.
Of course, there we go. That is exactly it. That's why. But I, other coaches do not like my style. I'm okay with that. But I tell them, when I'm standing there at the edge of the pool and I see the guy going down for the third time, I shouldn't help. Right? Yeah. I shouldn't save him. I shouldn't say, "Wait, let me show you how to swim." No. I'll tell you, no. And we have to come to the realization that this is a retraining. We talk about reskilling, right? That's a new word. Let's reskill. Yeah, you're right. But let's not reskill you how to use the latest software. Let's reskill you about the skill set that matters the most, being a team leader.
100%. And it's the accidental manager problem, isn't it? And with your legal background as well, like you wouldn't put a lawyer in the courtroom without teaching them how to do the job. So why do we do that with team leaders? Well, you wouldn't go with a doctor, I hope. Well,
exactly. But by the way, the guy who gets promoted is the best individual performer. Mm-hmm. Because we believe somehow, leaders believe, we can translate that into being a leader. But we're not going to tell you or show you or help you do that. We're just going to say, here's the key. Go in and make this happen. No, you're right. It just makes no sense. And yet we're breaking the Industrial Revolution, 150-year practice.
Yeah, I think part of the problem as well is people management, let's call it. It's seen as it's linked to a better reward, isn't it? And so promoting that best single contributor to that role, you're rewarding them for being the best. Whereas quite a lot of the time, what you've really done is punish them for being the best, because you've taken them away from a job that they're really good at, they probably enjoy, and then you've thrown them in the deep end with a new job that they don't understand, you've not taught them how to do, and they probably maybe didn't even want to do it in the first place. And so it's
everything you say is absolutely true, but we lure them with a title and money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we praise them. We love you. Oh, you're so good. I know you're going to really, really be good. And you're right. Interestingly enough, I tell most leaders, you need to go to your managers and say, it's okay not to be a leader. I'm going to, because of what you do and you're a high performer, I will reward you accordingly. But you don't have to get promoted to get it. Mm-hmm. And those who are struggling, and by the way, it's like 60% of new team leaders fail in the first 18 months. But they don't leave the position. They just fail. Mm-hmm. And we leave them there, continuing to not be able to do the job so that their team gets more and more demoralized. And then they leave, and you're like, "Oh my God, what happened here?" Well, you happened, right? You're the one that did this to me and that team, and now you're wondering why I'm burned out and they're leaving. But burnout amongst middle managers is greater than any other group. Over 60% reported. By the way, these are people that do not want to tell you they're failing. Who wants to tell you you're failing? And yet they will report it given the opportunity and say, I need help. And we go, well, that's an interesting statistic, but I'm sure it doesn't apply to my guys. What? Of course it does. Wake up here. Anyway, So we're in this transition. This asteroid is struck. Command and control is going to be killed off whether they like it or not. I think that there's a lot of things. AI is a really great X factor. For those who fear it, it's because you're not going to know how to lead. You're only a manager. Guess what? Either get better or get ready to not be in that position. It's coming.
Yeah, I think so. And another statistic that's been doing the rounds, I've seen it a few times recently. I think it was the Chartered Management Institute or somebody like that was posting, and it's exactly on this issue as well. They reckon, I think it was 82%. It was definitely more than 80, but 82% of new managers receive no training in management.
That is so absurd.
Isn't it?
I've seen that over and over, and I know it's the truth, but I'm like, how stupid are you? You're trusting the welfare of your organization and your people in the hands of someone who's like, by the way, everybody thinks they know the new job. Nobody knows the new job until they're in it. Mm. You know why? We convince them they can do it, and we make it sound really good. We give them a little extra money, and then we walk away. It's like, this is just insanity. That's you see, I get worked up with it when
same, yeah.
I'm like, what? Stop this, and yet they're like, well, no, we're okay. Wow, if you want what you say you want, this is not the way to get it.
Yeah,
reality, truth to power. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if 82% of bus drivers weren't taught how to drive a bus.
Well, in fact, I think that may be true. That
can't be true.
You have to have it been in Chicago. I think that they've actually just all stoned. But regardless, you're right. You said it earlier. How dare you say that you're going to operate on me when you haven't been a medical degree? There are things that we don't allow. But when we get to this level, we're like, well, yeah, that's the way it's always been. That's the problem now. And by the way, it never worked. It just, it just allows you to get by. And the marketplace has become much more hyper competitive, and it will not allow this. It won't. Think about, my wife is an avid Amazon shopper, aren't we all? And one of the keys is they'll take anything back for no reason. As I grew up, I'm old enough to know that if you tried to return something in the old days, they wouldn't take it back. They were like, you bought it. You can't, you can't bring it back. So guess what? This whole thing has accelerated to where we don't have this lag time anymore with providing services or product. Therefore, the team has got to get better, but the team won't get better unless the team leader gets better. It's such a natural progression. Shockingly simple, shocking that so few companies get it.
Yeah, I think you got it in one, I think, with this is the way it's always been. You know, it was good enough for me when I was in that role, therefore it's good enough for you. That whole mentality is so difficult to break. You know as well as I do.
Well, the status quo is protected and defended by those people in power because they're the ones that establish the status quo and follow the status quo. So when you say, something, we need to change that, they're like, no. Nobody, truly, no one loves change. I don't care what you say. Nobody loves it. It's a painful process. And everybody who's in power goes, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, you need to do that because, again, post-pandemic is the key here. This is no longer a choice. You either do this or you're the dinosaur.
Indeed. Well, we've covered pretty much all the questions I had about what you do and how you've got there. Which is good. It's good. It saves me a little bit of work. So a couple of follow-on questions for you then. I mean, obviously leadership is your thing. You're an expert in that. So what would you say from your whole career, both careers, all your careers so far, what's the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned in that time?
Well, and I have to admit, I've already covered it. It is the need to have a fool, probably a flock of fools. I'm actually getting ready to publish a book called Every Leader Needs a Fool in Their Life. I've done the TEDx talk. Everyone needs a fool in their life. First, I truly believe that. We all do, just because we do need to understand who we really are. And we don't do that I love self-reflection, except it's like looking in the mirror. And there are too many things that I don't see because I'm not looking for them. Everyone does need that person they respect and who cares about them. To have them as the person that you can be real with, that will tell you about that. That's my wife. For me, that was my first fool. I actually have a flock of fools. I have 3 people that I rely upon to tell me when I'm an idiot, because I'll revert back to narcissism in a heartbeat because I like it. Right? I mean, it gives me a lot of internal joy. I've got a lot of baggage I'm still getting rid of. So no, I think that is the lesson. And if you can't find a fool, you're not looking. But let me give you one more corollary. The TEDx talk talks about this. Once you've found a fool, you need to become a fool. Because if you have the benefits, realize the benefits of having a fool, and you will, then you need to recognize that someone that you love and respect and want to succeed needs you as their fool. Because we need to pay it back. I don't believe in collecting as if we don't owe. We do. We don't collect seldom do we deserve what we get. I said to you earlier, I live a life that is much more than I deserve. And so my concept is I now need to give. Now the coaching process allows me to do that. I get paid handsomely, by the way. I am coin operated. But I also, and by the way, I have 58 people in my coaching process right now. Other coaches say that's impossible. You can't possibly coach that many people. And I say, normally I would agree with you. The difference is that first, I am very selective. And the reason it works is because of the exchange of energy that takes place in a productive coaching conversation, right? Because I believe that you either are exchanging energy, you're either giving energy or taking energy. But if you can exchange energy, then suddenly it is fulfilling. And everybody talks about wanting to find fulfillment. I find fulfillment in the coaching process. And therefore, it's just really cool.
I've not heard it called the fool before, I must say, but I do like the concept. And I think it does take a certain amount of courage to open yourself up to that as a leader, particularly given all the things you talked about and kind of the established way of doing it and the ego being tied up in it as well and your whole self-image. I think I can understand why not everyone is able to do it. But I also massively see the value of it. So, yeah, really important lesson. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, no worries. And opposite question then, what do you think is the most common mistake that the majority of leaders will make? If we haven't covered it already, we might have.
I think we've covered most of it. Again, I think the echo chamber is the most difficult thing for a leader to first realize they're in it. And second, escape it, because people around you will take advantage of you given the opportunity as a leader. They have something to gain from being in that echo chamber and not telling you the truth. And I think that leaders have got to be very cognizant of the fact that you need to choose your associates carefully. I was terrible at that. Obviously, I chose people that had no interest in me, but wanted to take advantage of me, and I was open to that. I wanted to be part of a club. I wanted to be a member, and I sought that, and I found it in my clientele. So I think that leaders have got to understand that it is so easy for that echo chamber to develop. And those people within that echo chamber don't want you to get out of it. They want you to stay in it, not because it's beneficial for you, but because it's beneficial for them.
Yes, in a very similar way, I suppose, to the bosses and the way they treat employees, in inverted commas again. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, aren't there?
All throughout this, I believe that every team is a microculture that reflects the team leader or the manager. Mm-hmm. And it's always interesting because every organization wants a culture, right? I want to have this culture. Well, every team leader, unless it's very clear and it is a part of the DNA, will interpret that culture according to their own needs. Therefore, you have an organization with a culture, and then you have a variety of microcultures. That's why training is required. Giving them skills is required. Teaching them how to be the leader is required, because otherwise they will interpret it, all of those things, according to their needs. So the microculture has got to be connected to the culture, and you can only do that if you have a consistent, cohesive message and give people the skill sets necessary to be a part of that culture.
Yeah, culture is another one that I think so many people struggle with, don't they? And I think what makes it so difficult is it's there whether you like it or not.
There we go.
If you're not aware of it, if you're not doing something to try and manage it, lead it, let's say lead, it's going to just develop by default, isn't it? It's going to be whatever the norm or the minimum behavior that is tolerated, that will become the culture. And so if you have things like we mentioned about the toxic people earlier, or if you got like bullying in the organization or harassment or anything like that, your culture becomes the sum of the worst behavior that you allow to happen as the leader. And so, and people wonder about, how do these toxic cultures take off in all these big companies? It's exactly that, because people see something bad happen and they don't do anything about it, either because they don't think it's their responsibility, or they don't see it's a problem for them, or they don't appreciate the impact it's had on others, and so on and so on and so on. And it's exactly that. That's how it happens. So yeah, I think a big part of leadership is leading that culture as well. I completely agree with you there.
Well, and you're spot on with that, and clearly get out of your echo chamber and take a look around at the reality of your organization if you have the guts to do so. Otherwise, stop whining about it and accept the fact that you allowed this thing to grow. And you're right. Unfortunately, as human beings, we gravitate, I hate it, but we gravitate towards the bad things, because if they exist, we don't know what to do about them, so we just accept them. Right. And therefore it grows instead of it should be the good things. We always think the good is going to overpower the bad. There has to be somebody that makes sure that happens. Right. That's called the leader. Otherwise, these disruptive forces will grow and take control. But by the way, the concept of psychological safety is one I strongly believe in. If you don't have that, you can't have a good culture. Someone has got to have the fool. The fool had the psychological safety to tell the king the truth. If your employees don't feel they're safe, they never will tell you the truth. They may not lie to you, they just won't say anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me, it's over dramatic to give this quote, but it's the Edmund Burke quote, isn't it? Of the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And yes, that is dramatic, but it's the same problem on a smaller scale.
Well, it is. And once again, that's a cliche that's true.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that. If you don't stand up for what's right, I guarantee you what's wrong will dictate. It's so simple, but not, leadership is simple, but not easy.
Indeed. Well, we've had an episode, in fact, with that exact title. So
very good.
Okay, so let's go back towards the positive again. I think we've covered the negative side of it. What's been your own best experience of being led?
I have to admit that I am a terrible follower. I have created I do not work well with others. I tried as obviously I've worked in a warehouse situation at nights to go through law school, got out of law school, and I started my own practice. So my experience of being led is extremely limited. The Army, led in the Army, and you could easily tell good leaders, bad leaders, by how they led the team, right? And when I got out, I went to work for a labor organization, and the leader of that is probably the best example of a leader that impacted me dramatically and did very well as a leader. Led an independent labor organization and to be an independent labor organization is extremely difficult, just because the concept of being a labor organization in general is tough. So that was mine. That was my one example that stands out of a leader that impacted me dramatically with the good things. By the way, it didn't stick. Unfortunately, I was drawn to the dark side when I quit that job, and clearly anyway, sorry, that one's difficult for me because I've been on my own so long that I can see leaders that I'm inspired by, but when it comes to being led, no.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, it's still something to look back on though now. So, I mean, it's obviously that person is stuck in your mind. So this will be a difficult question, I think. Yeah. A lot of people struggle with this one. Let's see how you get on. If you could go back in time to the beginning of your career, your first ever job, what advice would you give your younger self?
The same thing, the same advice I give leaders now. Mm-hmm. Find your fool. Listen to them. And be very cautious about who you associate with, because there are people there, manipulators, sycophants, that want what you have or what you can get them, and will do whatever is necessary so that you'll do what they want, not what you should do. Those two things, association, my wife tells me I'm the worst judge of character she's ever met. She's my true north. She'll tell me, stay away from that person. She has the instinct for it. I don't. And so that's what I would tell my younger self. I would say, listen, you need to understand that you have blind spots and triggers that are inherent in who you are. And your background has created those. Your experience has created those. I had a very turbulent childhood. Not that it was toxic necessarily, but it was very turbulent. And I suffered as being an outsider. So I sought a group that would accept me as a part of that group, and that was one of my blind spots, because I needed that, and I found it. Unfortunately, I found it with the wrong group. So I would tell my younger self exactly that. You need to know your blind spots, and you need to know your triggers, and you need to associate appropriately.
Again, it reminds me of another one of these cliches about your personality becomes the sum of the group that you spend the most time with.
How could it not?
Yeah, and I think that's true professionally as much as personally, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, trial lawyers are a crazy, insane, ego-driven group, by the way. Just because that's the nature of trial work, is that your ego has got to be huge. You've got to be able to endure and handle clients who aren't. By the way, I never had a client who told me the truth. They don't want it. They want you to like them because they think that'll make you defend them or represent them better. So they want you to see something that's not reality. And you get pretty good. I tell everybody I've got a very highly attuned bullshit meter, right? Because I had to have it to be able to negotiate my clients. And so, no, it's absolutely the case. I don't know how it could be otherwise. The environment that we're in, whether it be work or home, dictates to a large extent who we are. Now, once we break out of that environment, then that's what the echo chamber is part of that. Once you get out of that, you can then develop. But most of our environments are very constrictive. Right? The home environment is constrictive. How do we get out of that? We go to school. We start to see things differently. Who we associate with at school, though, suddenly develops another one of those, right? Do we want to be with the cool kids? Do we want to be with the nerds? Whatever the concept or the group is. And suddenly you become a part of that. Well, that starts to eliminate your ability to participate in these other groups. The broader the concept, the better, but we are drawn to that. And once we're there, it's hard for us to get out of it. It becomes our comfort zone. It's
a logic that is there and true, but probably the more I think about it, the more depressing it gets. So I'm going to move on.
We always want to think we're in control of our lives, and I have never found that to be true. We have to take control of our lives.
Yes.
It doesn't come naturally because other people are controlling our lives. We haven't realized that. And when you do, you go, okay, do I want to continue with that, or do I want to take control? Taking control is moving outside your comfort zone, which is difficult for most people, right? It's pain. All of this is very painful psychologically. It seems so simple. We talk about it, right? And it's an interesting conversation. But when I tell leaders, you need to transform, you need to do this, they struggle with that, because you know what? The most difficult person for me to coach is a successful person, because I'm asking them to change. And they say, well, wait a minute, I'm successful. And my response to that, then why are you talking to me? Because there's an itch that you want to scratch. That's why you want coaching, right? That to me, that's why you're talking to me. You say that you're a finished product. No, you're not. And you realize you have potential that is unrealized. And you're trying to figure out how to realize it. You're not as fulfilled as you think you are. You start to look at your work and go, is this meaningful? And that's a conversation that is extraordinarily painful. So the concept of breaking out and taking control, you need help with that. That is the value of mentors and coaches.
Absolutely.
Because one, you say, I've been where you are. And I know how hard this is going to be, and I am going to help you. You still got to do the work. Like I said, I'm not carrying your pack. You've got to do the work. If you're not, and most people do not want to do the work. They find out how hard it is, and they go, oh my God, let me just go back to, okay, that's fine. But realize you're not satisfied.
Yeah, it all makes sense to me, definitely. I think, the comfort zone is a particularly challenging concept. And I think going back again to the beginning of the conversation, I think that's why the COVID years have become so powerful, because they forced a lot of managers out of that comfort zone, out of that automatic assumption of, I pay them, therefore they'll do what I ask when I ask, and nothing else matters. And that comfort zone was kind of yanked out at the last minute, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, and employees, again, the workforce is what is dictating the change, because, there's a movie you probably have never seen called Network. And the protagonist leans out the window at some point and he says, I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that suddenly it resonates with people around him. And that's the workforce. Right now, they're saying, you said you cared about me. It's apparent you don't. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Recognize that that's what you have to deal with now. And you can't do that by saying, let's go back to the way it was. They realize that's not the way. So anyway,
indeed.
And by the way, it's one of the reflections on this is the sudden approval in America about unions, because the realization that as an individual, if I have a company that is not concerned about my well-being, there's little I can do except leave or tolerate. Union approval on unions is now at a 2-decade high in America. Now, what that means, I don't know, but I can tell you that is a reflection of I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And I realize I, as an individual, can't change this. As a group, we can. That's unionism in a nutshell. Collective action.
Yeah, it is. It's quite different on this side of the pond. Unions have not had much strength for many decades now, generally, with a few exceptions like the big transport unions and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it feels like that the whole concept exists exactly to kind of push back, fight back against the enormous power of the employer versus the individual employee. And so logically, it makes sense that there's a rise in that kind of approval and seeing that as a good thing in recent years.
And the new generation, as much as everybody wants to complain about Gen Z, they are bringing a different concept. Think about the pandemic and the impact it has on Gen Z. They only knew remote work. right? You couldn't go to work. And when I look at their refusal to accept the system, think about Starbucks. Everyone thinks Starbucks is a fantastic company, except their employees are organizing slowly, and Starbucks is fighting it dramatically to kill it off, right? And they may very well win because huge corporation against a very small organization. But that's the thing with me, as I look at that and go, Starbucks employees have decided that company, which very progressive, pays well, benefits, health benefits, one of the big things for part-time workers, they're going, no, we want to, and one of the things that we forget is employees want a voice. They want a voice at the table. They're not saying we need to be the deciding voice. We are a stakeholder. And we want to be treated with respect, and our voice needs to be heard. I don't know. That's the way I think it. We call it capitalism and stakeholdership, and yet it's. We know the verbiage. We know the concept. I don't like it. One of the biggest reasons employers hate unions is not the money; it's the control. They suddenly have a control factor called a contract that requires them to respect employee rights. And if they violate them, there's a grievance and arbitration procedure. Well, that takes away their control. That's why employers, from my perspective, that's why they hate unions. It's not the money. It's lack of control. And that leaders have got to be willing to give that up if they want reciprocity from their employees, their team members.
Absolutely. Yeah. The point about the employees as a stakeholder is really important. I think the really successful leaders, ultimately the successful companies, are the ones who do give the employees the voice. They make them feel heard. They recognize the fact that they're not just a stakeholder, really, are they? Without them, there is no company.
Exactly.
So, yeah, why would you risk alienating that crucial part of your business? I've never got that.
You would never treat an investor like that.
No.
Right? I mean, you would go, you've given me money to build my company. Let me piss on you for a while.
Yeah. Well, some people might, but I guess they wouldn't. They wouldn't get much investment in the future if they do. But yeah, it's a funny one. It's a funny one.
Leadership heroes.
I've only got one question left, and it's my favourite question. I'm really looking forward to your answer, actually. It's called Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick one person, and that could be anyone you like, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
Well, it's an easy answer. Abraham Lincoln.
Oh.
Think about what he accomplished with the Civil War. And, I often, and I've been waiting for somebody to write an alternative history. What would have happened if Lincoln had lived? Because I believe that he would have brought the country together in a way that would have reshaped America. Because what we're facing right now in America is reflective of the fact that after the Civil War, it did not go well. Reconstruction did not go well. But Lincoln managed to bring together, in fact, there's a very good book out about how he brought people into his circle that did not agree with him. And he formed that team. And that team went on to do something that was extraordinarily difficult, win a Civil War. But Lincoln was about principle, but he also was a storyteller. Right, the ultimate storyteller. Think about I'm throwing things out there. The Gettysburg Address, one of the most masterful pieces of speaking that he wrote on the back of an envelope on the train to Gettysburg. It just astounds me. I struggle over putting that message together. The TEDx talk was perfect about that. It's extraordinarily structured and it had to have impact. He did that on a train ride, and the intellect capable of doing that. And here is a man that suffered tragedy, personal tragedy, and had psychological difficulty that kept him in depression. a lot of his leadership time, and yet he overcame. That's my guy.
Yeah, fair enough. He is definitely a good example of a great leader from history, and I think we've had him picked before as well. So
really?
You're in good company.
Well, I'll give you one more, but it sounds patronizing. Winston Churchill.
Yeah, had him as well. Sorry.
Yep, these are, obviously, yeah. I always love people saying Jesus. I was like, well, Son of God. I'm not sure what to say about that, except sure. I like the human being that, and by the way, obviously Christ struggled with being human, and I think that's important for everybody to realize. Even God needs a fool, right? I mean, you can't be infallible. It does not work with the human condition. And so I look at those leaders that overcome their own issues and become tremendous leaders. And they're examples for us all, but they're hard to live up to, no question. I also, by the way, I can keep throwing them out. Eisenhower.
Mm-hmm.
Another, but and the concept of war, unfortunately, runs through those that I mentioned because I also just saw Napoleon, the movie, and the concept of Napoleon as a military leader, we all think about Napoleon as a person who transformed French society, the court system, right, the educational system. See, we forget about that. He actually did things that we don't recognize that have lasted today. I
mean, I think people like Churchill and Napoleon are particularly interesting because they also had reputations at the time as being quite difficult people to deal with. And yet now we look back and see them as great leaders in one aspect or another.
Well, interestingly enough, after he had helped Britain win the war, the Allies, he got voted out of office because, he was a difficult person to deal with. And yet, and that character, I guess I'm drawn to those characters that have their own struggle. I'm not sure Churchill had a fool.
I don't know either. Yeah.
I know Napoleon didn't.
No. Well, Paul, it's been really great talking to you today. I could carry on for another hour, but I don't want to steal that much of your time. Last thing I'll ask you, if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, maybe get a copy of that book when it comes out, or get in touch with you, where can they go?
It's two. I'll give you two websites. There's paulgloverspeaks.com and also paulglovercoaching.com. Very original. And LinkedIn is Paul Glover Coaching. Anyone who contacts me, obviously, I'll respond back. And second, the book will be coming out. And I'm doing this I'll bend your ear. I'm doing this differently than I've ever. I did one book 12 years ago. And this book is Every Leader Needs a Fool. It's going to be progressive launch. I'm going to launch 2 chapters a month. And the reason for that is every chapter has an action plan. So you'll take the concepts that are in each chapter and you'll fill out a personal action plan based on attempting to put together a plan that gets you to where you say you want to go. And during that month, we will have a live webinar to go over the material in the book and the action plans that have been sent to me. So I'm going to try something different. And over a period of 6 months, the book will be completely launched.
Oh, that's a cool idea. I like that.
Kind of interesting. We'll see. It could be a complete failure, but I can't fear failure. I already have.
Well, it sounds like a bit of fun, actually. Yeah.
Yes. And the ability to interact with people with a book, the first book, I hated. I told my editor at the time, I said, nobody's going to read this because it talks about what we're talking about 12 years ago. So this book, I think, is much more relevant, and it gives me the chance to not only write the book, but also interact with readers.
Yes, definitely. And timing is everything, as they say. So there you go. Well, best of luck with the launch. I'm sure it's going to be really good. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, David. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure talking to you and obviously being allowed to talk.
Well, likewise, it's been great listening to you as well. So thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You also.
And what a story that was from Paul. It was so fascinating to hear how he's been through the struggles and trials and tribulations, some of that literally in his career so far. And so inspirational as well to hear what he's managed to turn that all into. And his approach to coaching and leadership are so spot on, exactly the kind of thing that Leading with Integrity is all about as well. So, listener, I'm sure you can tell how much I enjoyed that conversation already. I hope you found it useful too. If you would like to learn more about Paul and his book and his coaching practice, all of the websites and the links and his LinkedIn profile are in the show notes in the episode description. So click on all of those, go and visit, learn more, get in touch with him. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Thanks again so much to Paul for his time today, and to you as well, listener, for being with us again. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you would like to show your support for the podcast, you can leave a review or a rating wherever it is that you're listening, and you can join the Integrity Leaders online community. You'll get access to all kinds of resources. We've got a couple of courses on there. We've got leadership materials and references and further reading ideas. You also get early access to these podcast episodes and to the newsletter that goes alongside them as well. And of course, the opportunity to meet and interact with other leaders at a similar stage of their career. Right now, you can join with a 60-day free trial. You'll get access to everything the community has to offer. At the end of the 60 days, it's up to you if you want to subscribe, or there is a no-fee reduced access option as well if you just like to be a member and be involved. To get access to all of that, head over to www.leadernotaboss.com and sign up today. Thank you again for listening. Join me again next week when it is International Leadership Week 2024. So I'm obviously excited about that. We're going to be making a big deal of it. There's going to be daily episodes, in fact. I'm going to have to refer to my notes now for the first time in a long time, just to tell you, just to list through all the episodes and all the guests we're going to have. So on Monday the 15th, introducing International Leadership Week, for those of you who aren't aware of it and what's going on, some of the resources you can access, the events that people like the Institute of Leadership will be running. I'll be joined by a series of guests from recent episodes, and we're going to be talking about the theme of International Leadership Week this year, which is Collaborate for Success. So we'll get some different opinions from different walks of life and different perspectives on leadership and how best to achieve successful collaboration from a leadership standpoint. So that's going to be an interesting one. Then on Tuesday, I'll be joined by Raymond Lauk. He's a former educator in the US, former school district administrator, and he's had a really interesting journey, got a very unique perspective on leadership as a result. That's a really great conversation. I hope you join me for that one. The next day, we've got another Raymond Kemp this time. He's a retired Master Chief of the US Navy. He had a 33-year career in the Navy, starting as a data processor and ending up as a Fleet Master Chief for Naval Forces Europe and Africa. And his career took place during some very big changes in the US military history, some controversial times as well. And he's got some great insights into the leadership impacts of that, the change management aspects, diversity and inclusion as well. Really interesting conversation and a great guy to talk to as well. So highly recommend that episode on Wednesday the 17th. And then on Thursday, the 18th, I'm joined by Summer Jelinek, who used to work at Disney. So that's another very interesting organization, some great perspective again on leadership there. Going to be a good conversation as well. And then to round out the week, on Friday the 19th, it's going to be just me, a solo episode with some reflections on everything we've learned from International Leadership Week this year, some final closing thoughts, a quick sum up of what I learned from some of the events as well that I'll be attending during the week. It's going to be a busy week, but I'm so excited about International Leadership Week that I couldn't stop myself really. So I hope you'll be there for all or some or at least one of those episodes next week. And in the meantime, start thinking about collaboration. How effective is it where you work? What can you do about it as a leader? Please do email in or send me a message on LinkedIn or stick it in a review or something, whatever's easiest for you. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about it and what makes collaboration and collaborative working a success or not. So that's all from me today. I was going to say I will see you next week, but I won't see you. You might not see me unless you're watching us on YouTube, but you'll definitely hear me. I hope. So until next week, be a leader, not a boss.